Have you ever stopped in the middle of your waiting season and quietly asked yourself why everything seems delayed when you have been praying faithfully, working honestly, trusting patiently, and believing deeply that something good was supposed to happen by now, yet the door never opened, the message never came, the opportunity never arrived, and the person you thought would stay somehow disappeared from your life, as if heaven itself pressed pause on your story right when your heart was ready to move forward? Because what if I told you that the delay you are feeling right now is not rejection, it is not punishment, it is not abandonment, and it is definitely not failure, but instead it is protection, so intentional, so precise, and so powerful that one day you will look back and realize that if God had answered your prayer when you first asked Him to, it would have led you into something that looked right on the outside but would have quietly broken you on the inside. Because sometimes the greatest evidence that God is working in your life is not the doors He opens but the doors He refuses to unlock even when you beg Him to. There are moments when heaven feels silent, and those are the moments that test your faith the most, because silence makes you wonder if you are forgotten. Silence makes you question whether your prayers are still being heard. Silence makes you compare your timeline with everyone else's progress, and suddenly it feels like life is moving forward for everyone except you. But what you cannot see yet is that God does not measure your life according to the speed of other people's journeys, because the truth is some people arrive quickly only to realize later they arrived somewhere they were never meant to stay, while others are delayed because they are being protected from storms they cannot yet see forming ahead of them right now. There is something happening behind the scenes of your life that your eyes cannot detect and your mind cannot calculate. Because divine protection often looks like human delay and heavenly wisdom often feels like earthly frustration, but there is a reason why that relationship did not last even though your heart was ready. There is a reason why that opportunity disappeared even though you qualified for it. There is a reason why your plans suddenly shifted even though everything seemed perfectly aligned, because sometimes God removes what looks good to you because He sees what is hidden from you and He loves you too much to allow temporary excitement to lead you into permanent regret. Think about how many times in your past you prayed for something you were absolutely convinced would make your life better, only to later discover that losing it was actually one of the greatest blessings you never recognized at the time. Because protection rarely feels like protection while it is happening, but later it becomes the clearest evidence that God was guiding your steps even when you thought you were walking alone. There is someone listening right now who feels like their life has been paused in a season they never expected to stay in this long, and maybe you are watching other people celebrate milestones that you have been praying for privately and quietly, wondering why your turn keeps getting postponed. But what you must understand is that delay is not denial and postponement is not punishment, because when God delays something, it is never because He forgot about you, but because He is arranging circumstances around you that must be aligned before what you are asking for can safely enter your life. Sometimes what you call delay is actually preparation, because the blessing you are praying for requires a stronger version of you than the one who first asked for it, and God is more interested in preparing your character than rushing your timeline, because He knows that if the blessing arrives before your heart is ready, it could become a burden instead of a breakthrough. There are doors you thought should have opened by now, and conversations you thought should have happened by now, and answers you thought should have arrived by now. But what if heaven delayed those things not because they were wrong, but because the timing was incomplete? Because timing in God's plan is not about convenience, it is about protection and positioning and purpose working together in ways that only make sense when you finally reach the moment you were meant to arrive at. All along, you see, there is a difference between something being good and something being right for your life right now, and sometimes God delays good things because He is protecting you from receiving them at the wrong time, which could quietly turn something beautiful into something painful, because even blessings can become burdens when they arrive outside of divine timing. Some delays are not about what God is keeping from you, but about what He is keeping away from you, because there are situations you cannot see yet, conversations you have not heard yet, intentions you have not discovered yet, and outcomes you have not experienced yet, and God in His wisdom is standing between you and something that would have looked like progress at first but would have slowly created confusion later. There is a reason your spirit felt uneasy even when the opportunity looked perfect on paper, and there is a reason certain plans suddenly stopped moving forward even though everything seemed prepared, because sometimes the clearest sign that God is protecting you is not the excitement you feel when something begins, but the interruption that happens before something continues. And maybe the hardest part of this season is trusting God when you cannot trace what He is doing, because waiting stretches your faith in ways comfort never could, and delay forces you to develop patience that instant answers never require. But the truth is, the strength you are building in this quiet season will become the foundation that supports the blessing when it finally arrives. Because what God is preparing for you is not temporary happiness but lasting purpose, and lasting purpose always requires careful timing. There are moments when God slows your progress, not because He wants to hold you back but because He wants to keep you safe from moving forward too quickly into something that looks right from your perspective but is incomplete from His perspective, because what feels like a closed door today may actually be a shield protecting you from walking into a room you were never meant to enter. And one day the same delay that frustrates you now will become the testimony that strengthens someone else later, because they will see how God protected your path even when you could not understand His decisions, and they will realize that the pauses in their own life are not empty spaces but sacred moments where heaven is rearranging circumstances in ways they cannot yet see. Sometimes God delays what you want because He is preparing something greater than what you asked for, and sometimes He delays who you are waiting for because He is still shaping both of your lives, so that when your paths finally cross it will not be temporary but purposeful, not confusing but clear, not fragile but strong enough to last through the seasons ahead that neither of you could survive alone right now. And the truth is, if God allowed everything to happen according to your original timeline, there are battles you would have walked into unprepared, and relationships you would have trusted too quickly, and opportunities you would have accepted too easily without realizing how much they would eventually cost you, because protection does not always feel comfortable, but it is always intentional. So if you are in a season where things feel slower than expected, quieter than expected, and more uncertain than expected, do not assume that God has stepped away from your story, because sometimes the quietest seasons are the ones where He is working the closest to you, shaping details you cannot yet recognize and arranging outcomes you cannot yet imagine, so that when the moment finally arrives, everything will make sense in a way it never could have if it happened earlier than it was meant to. Because this delay is not empty, and it is not meaningless, and it is not permanent, but it is protection in motion, even if you cannot yet see what you are being protected from. And one day very soon you are going to look back at this exact season and realize that what felt like waiting was actually guidance, what felt like silence was actually strategy, and what felt like delay was actually love protecting you in ways you could never have protected yourself. There is something God wants you to understand right now, because the delay you are feeling is not random, and it is not punishment, and it is not proof that you are forgotten. It is actually evidence that something too important to rush is being prepared behind the scenes where you cannot see it yet. And while you have been asking God why the door has not opened and why the opportunity has not arrived and why the relationship has not appeared and why the breakthrough still feels far away, heaven has been quietly rearranging details that your human timing would have ruined if they had been released too early. Because sometimes what feels like silence is actually protection, and sometimes what feels like waiting is actually positioning, and sometimes what feels like disappointment is actually mercy wearing a disguise that only makes sense later when you finally look back and realize how close you came to walking into something that looked right but would have slowly destroyed the peace God placed inside you. And the truth is, God is not delaying your life, He is defending your future even when you cannot recognize it yet, because there are conversations happening about you that you never heard, and decisions being made around you that you never saw, and dangers being moved out of your path that you never knew existed. And if God had answered your prayer at the exact moment you asked for it, you might have stepped into a situation that carried hidden pain attached to it. But because He loves you too much to let temporary excitement replace permanent purpose, He slowed things down in ways that felt confusing but were actually careful and intentional and full of wisdom that your current perspective could not fully understand yet. And maybe you thought the delay meant you were falling behind while everyone else seemed to be moving forward faster than you, but what you did not see was that God was protecting you from comparing yourself to journeys that were never designed for your calling in the first place, because your assignment is different and your timing is different and your preparation is deeper than what people can recognize from the outside. And there are seasons where God hides you not to punish you but to preserve you, because exposure before preparation creates pressure that breaks people before purpose has the chance to fully develop inside them. And the enemy wants you to believe that delay equals denial, but heaven wants you to understand that delay often equals defense, because God sees the full picture while you only see the moment you are standing inside right now. And the truth is, some doors did not open because they were never safe for you to walk through, even though they looked perfect at the time, and some relationships never formed because they would have distracted you from the identity God is still building inside you, and some opportunities disappeared because they were shortcuts that would have taken you somewhere faster but not somewhere better. And right now, even if you feel tired of waiting, even if you feel confused about why things have taken longer than expected, even if you feel like your timeline is not matching the dreams you once carried in your heart, you need to remember that God does not measure your life by speed, He measures it by purpose, and He refuses to rush the story He is writing through you, because rushed blessings often become heavy burdens later, but prepared blessings become foundations that last longer than temporary excitement ever could. And what you call delay, God sometimes calls alignment, because there are people being moved into position before you meet them, and environments being shaped before you enter them, and strength being built inside you before you step into responsibilities that would have overwhelmed the earlier version of who you used to be. And the reason the timing feels slower than expected is because God is not just preparing the blessing, He is preparing you to carry it without losing yourself once it finally arrives. And there is protection happening right now that your eyes cannot see, but your future will thank God for later, when everything finally connects in ways that make sense and you realize the waiting season was never empty. It was full of quiet miracles happening in places you were never meant to control in the first place. There are moments in your life when everything around you looks silent, but heaven is not silent at all. Because what feels like a delay to your eyes is actually movement in places your eyes cannot reach yet. And right now, even if you cannot see the evidence, there is something shifting behind the curtain of your situation, and God is not ignoring you. He is positioning you, protecting you, and preparing something so precise that if it arrived earlier it would have crushed you instead of blessing you. And this is why some doors closed without explanation and some opportunities disappeared without warning and some people walked away without giving you closure, because what you thought was loss was actually rescue in disguise, and what you thought was abandonment was actually divine interruption. Because there are seasons when God protects you not by opening doors but by refusing to open them yet, and the truth is if certain things had happened when you wanted them to happen you would not be the same strong person you are becoming right now, and that is why this delay is sacred even if it feels confusing and heavy. Because sometimes God delays what you are praying for until your heart becomes strong enough to carry it without losing yourself in it, and sometimes He delays people from entering your life because He is still removing the parts of you that would have accepted less than what He planned for you, and sometimes He delays success because He is protecting your character from being destroyed by attention that arrives before maturity, and sometimes He delays answers because the version of you that receives the answer must be wiser than the version of you that asked the question. And this is why the silence you are experiencing is not empty silence, it is preparation silence, it is protection silence, it is transformation silence. And even now, while you are wondering why things feel paused, heaven is actually arranging details that your future will depend on, and one conversation you have not had yet, one connection you have not met yet, one opportunity that has not appeared yet is already being aligned in your favor even though you cannot see it today. And this is the part nobody talks about, because people celebrate the miracle but they rarely understand the waiting that made the miracle possible, and they celebrate the breakthrough but they rarely understand the delay that protected the breakthrough from being destroyed too early. And right now what feels like stillness is actually God strengthening your spirit so that when the door finally opens you will not walk through it with fear but with confidence and clarity and peace. And this is exactly how Jesus prepared people before changing their lives, because He never rushed transformation, He always prepared hearts first before releasing answers. And He is still working the same way in your life right now, even if everything around you feels uncertain. And there is something powerful happening in this moment, because the delay you are experiencing is separating you from the version of your life that would have limited your destiny and moving you closer to the version of your life that will reveal why none of the previous doors worked out the way you expected them to. And one day you are going to look back at this exact season and realize that what felt like nothing moving was actually everything moving in the right direction at the right time, and the same God who protected you from what you could not see before is protecting you right now from what you still cannot see today. And when the timing finally shifts you will understand why certain paths disappeared, why certain relationships faded, why certain plans collapsed, and why certain opportunities never returned, because they were never meant to carry you into the future God prepared for you. And this is why your responsibility in this season is not to panic but to trust, not to force but to believe, not to rush but to stay faithful, because delay does not cancel destiny, it protects destiny, and every second that feels slow is actually building something strong underneath your life that cannot be shaken later. And if this message is reaching you right now, it is not random, because there is something in your spirit that already knows you are being protected even though your situation looks confusing, and that quiet feeling inside you is not imagination, it is confirmation that heaven is still working on your behalf even when the timeline does not make sense yet, and what is being arranged for you is bigger than what you asked for, and safer than what you expected, and stronger than what you planned yourself. And the moment it finally arrives you will not just receive what you prayed for, you will understand why the wait was necessary and why the protection had to happen first. Have you ever wondered why God lets you walk through seasons where nothing makes sense, where doors stay closed longer than expected, where people disappear without explanation, and where your prayers seem to echo back in silence as if heaven itself is waiting for the right moment to respond? Because what if I told you that some of the silence you are experiencing right now is not rejection but protection, not abandonment but alignment? Not delay but divine preparation for something so precise and so perfectly timed that if it arrived even one moment earlier it could actually harm the very future God is trying to secure for you. And that is why this season feels uncomfortable, because growth always feels like pressure before it feels like purpose. And sometimes God removes people not because they were bad but because they could not walk with you into the place He is preparing next. And sometimes He slows your progress not because you are failing but because He is strengthening your foundation underneath you, so when the blessing finally arrives it stays instead of collapsing under its own weight. And right now, even though you may feel overlooked, forgotten, or uncertain about what is happening behind the scenes, heaven is actively arranging conversations you cannot hear, redirecting paths you cannot see, and blocking outcomes that looked good on the surface but would have quietly damaged your destiny later. Because God does not prepare blessings casually, He prepares them intentionally and personally and specifically for the version of you that is being shaped in this very season, which means every tear you thought nobody noticed is actually watering the ground where your next breakthrough will rise from. Every lonely night is building a deeper strength inside you that success alone could never create. Every unanswered question is teaching you how to trust without control and believe without evidence. And that is why the enemy tries so hard to convince you that nothing is changing, because if you could see even 10% of what God is arranging for you right now, your faith would rise instantly and your fear would disappear completely. But faith grows strongest in moments when you choose to keep walking forward without visible proof. Because God is not just preparing what you are praying for, He is preparing you to carry it without losing yourself when it finally arrives. And the truth is, some of the things you thought you lost were actually things God rescued you from before they had the chance to quietly destroy the peace He planned for your future, which means this delay is not empty time, this delay is sacred time. This silence is not wasted silence, it is strategic silence. And even now, while you are wondering when things will change, God is already positioning people who will recognize your value, opening doors that will not close behind you, and writing a story for your life that will make sense in a way that only divine timing ever can. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you cannot fully see yet, because God does some of His deepest work in hidden seasons where nothing seems to move forward and everything feels paused. And while it looks like delay on the outside, heaven calls it preparation, because the truth is that if certain doors had opened when you first prayed for them, you would have walked into environments that were not aligned with your destiny. Relationships that would have drained your purpose, and opportunities that looked right but carried the wrong timing. And God loves you too much to let temporary excitement destroy permanent calling, which is why what you are experiencing right now is not rejection but protection in motion, not silence but strategy being written behind the scenes. Because sometimes God must slow your steps so He can remove what cannot go where you are going. And you may not realize it yet, but there are conversations happening you cannot hear, decisions being shifted you cannot influence, and paths being redirected you cannot predict, all because God is arranging something that will not just bless your present but secure your future. And this is why the delay feels longer than expected, because the blessing being prepared is larger than imagined, and when God prepares something significant, He never rushes the process. He strengthens the person first, shapes the heart first, builds the endurance first, and then releases the opportunity at the exact moment you are ready to carry it without losing yourself inside it. And that is what is happening to you right now, even if your emotions sometimes tell you nothing is changing, because growth often happens quietly before it becomes visible publicly, and while others may appear to be moving ahead faster than you, their timeline is not your assignment and their path is not your promise. Because what God is preparing for you requires a different level of stability, maturity, and spiritual strength, and that is why the waiting season feels heavier at times, because you are being trusted with something that cannot be handled casually, and every closed door you experienced recently was not meant to discourage you but to redirect you towards something that will not collapse later. Something that will not leave you confused later, something that will not force you to start over again later. Because God's protection does not always feel comfortable, but it always proves correct, and one day you will look back at this exact season and realize that what felt like delay was actually divine interruption, saving you from unnecessary pain, unnecessary mistakes, and unnecessary detours. And when that realization comes, you will understand why certain messages stopped, why certain plans failed, why certain meetings never happened, and why certain opportunities disappeared just when you thought they were finally working out, because God was not ignoring your prayers, He was answering them in a deeper way than you expected, and even now He is aligning the right moment, the right connection, the right place, and the right breakthrough that will arrive not late but exactly on time, and when it comes it will carry peace instead of confusion, clarity instead of pressure, and stability instead of fear, and that is how you will recognize that what God delayed was never denied. It was protected until the right season arrived for you to step into it with confidence instead of uncertainty, strength instead of struggle, and faith instead of fear. There are moments in your life when the silence feels heavier than the storm ever did, moments when nothing seems to move forward and nothing seems to make sense, and it is in those exact moments that heaven is often working the hardest behind the scenes, because God is not only protecting what is ahead of you but also protecting who you are becoming before you arrive there. And the truth many people don't realize is that premature blessings can become permanent burdens if they arrive before your spirit is strong enough to carry them, which is why the delay you are experiencing right now is not rejection, it is preparation wrapped in mystery, protection wrapped in patience, and love wrapped in timing that you cannot yet see but will one day understand. Completely folded hands, because there are conversations happening in places you cannot hear, alignments shifting in directions you cannot see, and obstacles being removed from your path long before they ever had the chance to reach you, and what feels like standing still is actually God moving pieces on your behalf in ways that would overwhelm you if He showed you everything at once. So instead He gives you trust one day at a time, strength one moment at a time, and hope one reminder at a time that He has not forgotten you and He never will. Sometimes the reason something hasn't happened yet is because God is still working on the other side of the story, still preparing the people connected to your future, still removing confusion from someone's heart, still opening doors that must be opened before your path can safely continue forward. And if He rushed the process just to satisfy your timeline, you would walk into something incomplete instead of something ordained, something temporary instead of something lasting, something uncertain instead of something secure. which is why your waiting season is not wasted time but sacred construction time where foundations are being strengthened underneath your life even when nothing appears to be changing on the surface, and the strength you are developing right now will become the very reason you are able to hold the blessing when it finally arrives without fear, without doubt, and without losing yourself along the way. There are things you asked for that God heard immediately but chose to answer slowly because He saw things you could not see. He saw traps hidden behind opportunities, intentions hidden behind smiles, and distractions hidden behind excitement. And instead of allowing you to step into something that would later break your heart, He placed a quiet pause in your life that felt confusing at first but was actually saving you from pain you never even realized was waiting ahead of you. And one day when you look back, you will not be frustrated about the delay anymore. You will be grateful for it because you will finally understand that what didn't happen when you wanted it to happen was actually one of the greatest acts of protection God ever placed over your life. Right now it may feel like everyone else is moving forward while you are standing still, like doors are opening for others while yours remain closed, like opportunities are passing by while you are being asked to wait again and again. But what you cannot see is that your path is not being compared to anyone else's timeline because your purpose is not ordinary and your assignment is not random. And when God is preparing something that carries weight, something that carries impact, something that carries influence beyond what you currently imagine, He does not rush the process because rushed purpose creates fragile results but prepared purpose creates lasting transformation, and that is exactly what He is doing in your life right now even if it does not yet look the way you expected it to look. There are people who walked into things too early and spent years recovering from what they thought was a blessing but later realized was a lesson. And God loves you too much to allow that to become your story, which is why He sometimes protects you by slowing you down instead of speeding you up, redirecting your steps instead of confirming them immediately, and closing doors instead of opening them because He is not only thinking about your present comfort but also your future peace, and the future He is preparing for you is worth every unanswered question you are carrying right now because what He is building is not temporary happiness but lasting alignment that will make sense at exactly the right moment. Even the relationships that did not work out the way you expected were part of this protection. Even the opportunities that disappeared without explanation were part of this protection. Even the delays that made you question everything were part of this protection because sometimes the greatest miracle is not what God allows into your life but what He quietly keeps out of your life without you even realizing it. And when the right moment finally arrives you will see clearly that nothing was random, nothing was forgotten, and nothing was wasted because every pause had purpose and every delay had direction leading you exactly where you were always meant to be. So if today feels slower than you hoped and quieter than you expected and more uncertain than you planned, remind yourself that God does not delay without intention and He does not protect without purpose. And the same hands that are holding your future are also guiding your present even when you cannot feel them moving yet, which means the story is still unfolding, the preparation is still happening, and the blessing connected to your patience is still on its way toward you step by step. Moment by moment, perfectly timed in a way that will one day make you realize that the delay you feared was actually the protection that carried you safely into the life you were always meant to walk into. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you cannot fully recognize yet because when God begins protecting a future blessing He does not always make the process visible to you. Instead He allows you to walk through seasons that feel confusing, quiet, and sometimes even disappointing, not because He is distant from you but because He is working deeper than what your eyes can currently see. And the truth is, many people only thank God for what He gives them while forgetting to thank Him for what He quietly removes from their path. Yet some of the greatest protection in your life has come through the doors that never opened, the relationships that never stayed, the opportunities that disappeared without explanation, and the plans that suddenly changed direction even when you thought everything was finally falling into place. Folded hands, because what looked like loss at the time was actually alignment happening in real time, and what looked like delay was actually divine timing, adjusting your steps so that when the right moment arrives, nothing will feel forced, nothing will feel confusing, and nothing will feel uncertain. There are things God is preparing for you that cannot exist in your life until certain distractions are removed and certain doubts are healed and certain fears are replaced with confidence that only time and growth can create. And this is why your waiting season has not been empty, even if it felt slow, because while you were wondering why things were not moving forward, God was strengthening your spirit, refining your patience, and teaching your heart how to recognize what truly belongs in your life and what only looked right for a moment but was never meant to stay permanently. And the strength you are building right now is not random effort but intentional preparation that will make your future feel stable instead of fragile when it finally arrives. Sometimes the protection God places over your life shows up as distance between you and something you thought you needed. Sometimes it shows up as silence where you expected answers, and sometimes it shows up as redirection when you were sure you were already walking in the right direction. But each of those moments carries purpose, because God is not only protecting your destination, He is protecting your journey toward it, making sure that the version of you who arrives there is strong enough, wise enough, and ready enough to hold what you once prayed for without losing peace in the process. And that kind of preparation cannot be rushed, because rushed growth creates confusion, but patient growth creates clarity that stays with you long after the waiting season ends. You may not realize it yet, but even the disappointments that made you question your timing were quietly guiding you toward better alignment than you could have created on your own. Because when God protects your future, He does not always explain what He is doing while He is doing it. Instead, He asks you to trust that what is unfolding right now is part of a bigger plan than what you can currently understand. And that trust becomes the bridge between where you are today and where you are being led tomorrow. And every step you continue taking with faith instead of fear is proof that your story is still moving forward, even when it feels slower than you expected it to be. There are people connected to your future who are still being prepared just like you are, people whose timing must align with yours in ways you cannot control and cannot predict. And if those connections happen too early, they would not have the strength they need to last the way God intends them to last, which is why the waiting you are experiencing right now is not separation but synchronization happening quietly behind the scenes, bringing together the right people, the right opportunities, and the right circumstances, so that when everything finally meets at the same moment, it will feel natural instead of forced and peaceful instead of uncertain. One day you will look back at this season and realize that what you thought was silence was actually protection speaking in a language you had not learned to recognize yet, and what you thought was delay was actually guidance keeping you from stepping into situations that would have distracted you from your purpose instead of supporting it. And in that moment you will understand that God was never late and He was never distant, because every pause you experienced was part of a careful process, designed to lead you into something stronger than what you originally imagined for yourself. So if today feels like another day of waiting, another day of questions, or another day of wondering when things will finally change, remember that protection does not always feel comfortable while it is happening, but it always makes sense once its purpose is revealed. And the same God who is guiding your future is also guarding your present right now, which means nothing about your journey is accidental. Nothing about your timing is forgotten, and nothing about your story is unfinished, because what is being prepared for you is still moving closer step by step in ways you cannot yet see but will soon recognize with clarity, gratitude, and peace when the moment finally arrives exactly the way it was always meant to. There are moments in your life when the waiting begins to feel heavier than the struggle itself, moments when you start wondering if the silence means something has gone wrong or if the delay means something has been lost. But what you don't realize yet is that some of the most powerful protection God places over your life happens in seasons where nothing seems to be changing on the outside while everything is being carefully aligned on the inside. Because God is not only preparing the blessing you are praying for, but also preparing the version of you who will be strong enough to recognize it, protect it, and keep it when it finally arrives. And this kind of preparation takes time that cannot be rushed, even when your heart wishes it could move faster. Folded hands, because rushed timing creates fragile outcomes, but protected timing creates lasting peace that stays with you long after the waiting season ends. Sometimes what feels like distance from what you hoped for is actually closeness to what you truly need, and what feels like rejection from one path is actually redirection toward another path that carries more purpose than what you originally imagined for yourself. And this is why the delays you are experiencing right now are not empty moments but intentional pauses where God is making sure that what enters your life next will not confuse your spirit, weaken your confidence, or distract you from the purpose that has been placed inside you since the very beginning. Because when something is truly meant for you, it will arrive with clarity instead of chaos and peace instead of pressure. There are doors that did not open for you because they were never meant to lead you where you are going. There are people who did not stay in your life because they were never meant to walk with you into the next chapter of your story. And there are opportunities that disappeared without explanation because God could see what you could not see, and He cared more about protecting your future than satisfying your expectations in the present moment. And one day, when everything finally comes together, you will realize that what once looked like disappointment was actually direction guiding your steps away from confusion and toward alignment that will make sense in a way you could never have predicted earlier. Even now, while you are still waiting, there are things shifting quietly in your favor that you cannot yet recognize, conversations happening that you cannot hear, decisions being made that will eventually affect your path, and alignments forming between people and opportunities that will meet you at exactly the right time. Because when God protects something, He does not leave it unfinished, and He does not forget the prayers that were spoken from your heart even when you thought nobody was listening. And every moment you continue trusting instead of giving up is another step closer to the timing that has already been carefully prepared for you. You may feel like others are moving ahead faster than you and reaching milestones before you reach yours, but your journey is not designed to follow someone else's schedule, because your assignment carries a different purpose and your future carries a different responsibility than what you see around you right now. And when God is preparing something that carries meaning beyond the ordinary, He often slows the process so that when the moment finally arrives, you will not just receive the blessing, but also understand why it had to arrive exactly when it did instead of earlier when you thought you were ready. The truth is that protection often looks like delay while you are inside the moment, but later it reveals itself as guidance that saved you from unnecessary confusion, unnecessary pain, and unnecessary detours that would have taken you further away from the life you were always meant to live. And the strength you are building right now through patience is becoming part of the foundation that will hold everything together when the next chapter of your life finally begins to unfold in ways that feel steady instead of uncertain and peaceful instead of overwhelming. So if today still feels like another quiet step forward instead of a breakthrough, remind yourself that God does not pause your story without purpose, and He does not protect your future without intention, and the same hands that are shaping what is ahead of you are also guiding what is happening around you right now, even if you cannot yet see how everything connects together. Because the delay you are experiencing is not the end of movement in your life, but the beginning of alignment that will soon bring clarity where there was confusion and direction where there was uncertainty, in a way that will make you realize that every moment of waiting carried meaning that was always leading you towards something greater than what you first imagined.